In this video, we're talking all about game mechanics. Hey there, Kevin here. Yes, we are talking all about game mechanics today. And game mechanics refer to the rules and systems that define how a game operates and how players will interact with the game's environment. Now, these are separate from control systems, which is how your players physically interact or control your game. So for instance, two games can have identical game mechanics, but can be controlled in completely different ways. Game mechanics form the foundation of gameplay, dictating everything from movement and actions to goals and rewards. So let's go through some common elements of game mechanics. Game rules, the fundamental guidelines that govern the game. These can include how players move, what they can and can't do, how they can progress right through to the win and the lose states. This also includes such things as turns allowed in a puzzle, time to complete a level, or how many lives you may have. Player actions, these define what players can do in the game, such as moving, attacking, crafting, solving puzzles, or interacting with the environment. Environmental lore, this is how the game world reacts to your players' actions. Now this will of course depend on the type of game you're creating, but here's an example from a platformer. How fast can your player move in a platformer game? Are the platforms icy or sticky? Do the platforms have physics, or do they wobble? Do the platforms disappear when they're jumped on? Do they disappear after a short amount of time? Do the platforms move up, down, left or right? Rewards and penalties. These are the systems that provide feedback to the player based on their actions, such as earning points, collecting coins, gaining resources. Other examples can include losing health or completing levels. Turn-based or real-time systems. Now these mechanics govern whether a game progresses in turns or turn-based like chess or merge games. Typically, and especially for casual mobile games, these are real-time, such as action, arcade or racing. Examples could be an obby game or an arcade idle tycoon game. Objectives and challenges. These are what the players aim to achieve in your game. Now these are far-reaching, but could be completing a mission, defeating an opponent, or solving a problem. It can also include obstacles or difficulties that the player must overcome, and killing enemies, solving puzzles, or even resource management. Defining these is a critical step into keeping your game clear and easy to grasp for your players. Game goals. While similar to objectives and challenges, these are usually bigger picture or endgame type mechanics. It's often a great idea to set short, mid and long-term goals for your game. So how do you choose the right mechanics, and what game mechanics should you put into your game? Well, the simple answer is here that it really depends on the game you're building. Typically speaking, there's no hard and fast rule when it comes to deciding on exactly what mechanics you include. However, it's important that these seem somewhat familiar and your choices do not stray too far left field. So for example, if you're building a jumping or platformer game, people would expect to a degree some kind of precise jumping mechanics. How lenient or precise you actually want these to be will really depend on the audience and experience that you want to deliver. So carrying on with the platformer theme, let's take this to the extreme. In the original Tomb Raider games, you had to position Lara almost pixel perfect to land on platforms for the vast majority of the game. It was pretty brutal. Whereas in the 3D Mario games, the mechanics lend themselves way more to a fluid movement, speedy exploration and a more friendly game flow. Both platformers have very different game flow and feel, dictated by the game mechanics. Now of course there's room to mix this up throughout, but set a baseline and core feel to ensure it aligns with your vision of the game you're building. Think about the tone of your game and how you want the player's experience to be. Selecting the right mechanics for your game is a balancing act of simplicity, depth and alignment with your core game's vision. Start by defining the core gameplay experience you're trying to achieve, then tailor the mechanics to support that experience, ensuring that they're fun, challenging and engaging. Playtesting and iterating on your design will help you fine-tune your mechanics until you create that satisfying, cohesive gaming experience. To really emphasise your role of your game mechanics, let's take a look at the MDA framework. Now, back in 2004, 3 game designers, now industry veterans and highly respected, created a paper to try and essentially break down a framework of finding out what is fun in games. Now, why are we including this in this video about mechanics and not the creating fun in games video? Well, let's take a look at the framework and I'll explain more. They split this down into 3 separate pillars, and let's look at the relevance here to really cement the purpose of the game mechanics. The first one is mechanics, and you can think of this as systems, and they bundled everything inside this one, including the controls. Now, we do disagree slightly on this, as I think the controls are not part of your core mechanics. However, for the purpose of this, let's bundle it all in together. Think of this as the underlying code and logic in your game. Every single thing that goes into your game is cast as a mechanic for this framework. The second pillar is dynamics, and these are the direct consequences in response to when a mechanic is actioned. The third pillar is aesthetics. Now, this is more to do with the emotional responses that the game is going to deliver on. So the mechanics are the systems and the rules, the dynamics are what happens as a result of the mechanics, and the aesthetics are a direct response to the dynamics of your game. You start with your nose to create the systems and set some game rules. Now, when someone presses a button, for instance, a player could jump, and the aesthetic here would be the feeling that the player has while the player is jumping. When thinking about our game mechanics, it's often the case that it seems really great and logical on paper. But it's only ever possible to really test all this out when you're building your mechanics and prototyping your game. At this point, you want to critically playtest your game and feel how the mechanics are feeling in your hand. What might have seemed like a fun idea can often feel lackluster, and on the flip side, it's common that you'll stumble across a mechanic that's super fun and you can lean in and pivot more in that direction. It's great to be agile, especially as solo developers or in a small team. Of course, the larger your team, the more impact this will have, and there's often knock-on effects for pivoting and changing. However, that doesn't mean you shouldn't. In fact, 99% of the time, this is exactly what will happen. Ideas will spark and change as you gather momentum. However, it's important to use this list or a version of what makes sense to your game just to write it down, keep your game mechanics in order to ensure that you're keeping true to the experience you're trying to create. By planning in advance and understanding what you're trying to achieve, this enables you to potentially iterate and challenge how you can innovate or improve upon your ideas. In essence, your game mechanics should both enable and support your goals and vision for your game. They should support a strong, satisfying and engaging core loop and really meet the vibe of the game that you're going for. There are many ways to go this, and we'll cover game mechanics that we set up in Mafia City in the next video, but think long and hard about the mechanics in your game and don't be afraid to pivot a little bit if you come across and stumble across a mechanic that you feel is really kind of exciting and fun, and that is the magic of building your games. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Let me know down below in the comments and I will see you on the next video.